Let's get corrupted. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Joe with Meteoric Serpents coming back at you for another episode of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. Guys, it's 1 week post ColubridFest. It was a great time, and part of this episode is going to be recapping that. I actually have a vlog / video that I actually just released to the Patreon members, but it's going to be going up on YouTube soon, so you get to kind of see a little bit of my perspective of the weekend. And I'll be completely honest, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, just because I wound up being so busy, especially as a vendor. So I wish I caught more and better footage, but that just unfortunately didn't happen. So you guys get a nice little, I wanted to break it up into a few videos, but you get a nice 20-minute video showing my experience of the entire weekend. But besides that, thank you all for being here. We are back. Obviously, we had the one little week break because of the show. But yeah, we're back to it. Back on the live show, and always really excited to do that. And guys, I just got to say, and again, there's all going to be part of the ColubridFest recap, to all the people I met at that show, to everyone who came up to me and said, like, hey, I really like what you're doing with the show. Like, thank you so much. That means so much to me, especially because, I kind of just started this on a whim, and I just wanted to have fun and talk to fellow Colubrid enthusiasts. And turns out people like listening to it. So that's always super awesome. But yeah, tonight's guest is going to be PJ Kohn of Handmade Herps. Really excited to have him on, and we're going to bring him out soon, but just cover some, the usual business first. And you guys are going to see, and you've probably seen me wear it on a couple of my posts, but, I always have the Meteoric Serpents t-shirts available. Well, I now also have the Colubrid Corruption shirts available, which are really cool. Gray shirts, really nice material. It says "Let's Get Corrupted" on the front, with a cool image of, it's actually my image of a rhino rat snake that was vectorized. So it kind of almost looks like a drawing. And it's really cool. And it just says the Colubrid Corruption Podcast on the back. So I have a ton of shirts on hand. So if anyone's interested in that, please reach out and I'd be happy to send you one. And yeah, we are also on all podcasting platforms, guys. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, thank you so much. This is the platform that, I put a lot of work into. Make sure you leave a like. Make sure you hit subscribe. We're trying to hit that 1,000 subscribers still. And if you're listening elsewhere, please at least hop over to YouTube, leave a like. Do that for me. Also, on those other platforms, please rate and review it. That helps as well. Hopefully get this out to other Colubrid people. Really want this to spread around. And yeah, other than that, I have all my social medias down below, down in the description: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the good stuff. Yeah. Also, guys, make sure you're supporting USARK, USARK Florida. Those are the organizations that fight for our rights to keep our reptiles, whether it's as a business or just as our pets. It's very important to fight against some of these legislations that are going on right now. So, yeah. And here's where I would usually pitch, hey, guys, come to ColubridFest. But obviously it just happened. But I know it is in the works for 2025. So as soon as I have a little bit of information about the 2025 show, I'm going to be blasting it to you guys every week, so don't you worry. Also, make sure to check out our Patreon page. Like I kind of just mentioned, I just dropped the ColubridFest video on there. Whether you want some exclusive content, behind the scenes, early access to things, as well as just supporting this show, it always helps. It's a way of saying thank you. Also building an awesome Colubrid community. We got him in the chat right now. Adam from Ivory Colubrid Co. He is in the Patreon. And he bought a couple snakes from me at ColubridFest, which was awesome. It was great to meet him. Also, Phil over at Wellington Exotics. That's the homie as well. Can't forget to give him a shout out. Met him at ColubridFest too. He's in the Patreon, so super, super awesome. And yeah. And then, guys, before we do hashtag Colubrid Corruption of the Week. I do also want to announce, if you see in the bottom right corner of the screen, the Colubrid Corruption podcast is now officially sponsored by the Show Me Reptiles show and Show Me Marketplace. Really excited to partner with Mickey, especially after the way ColubridFest was put together. He did an amazing job. I know he also took a financial loss like directly out of his pocket just to make that show happen. So really appreciative of him. Also, guys, just Show Me Reptiles is, the shows, you can find them all over the country, all over the place. They're doing shows, I want to say almost every weekend in some part of the country. So definitely go check it out. And, if you support ColubridFest, you should definitely go support those other shows, because I know a bunch of the vendors there do those shows regularly. So go check it out. Also on that site, which is in the description, you will find the Show Me Marketplace, which is the new marketplace for your snakes, all your reptiles and whatnot, as like a buying and selling platform. So I'm beginning to put my animals on there. I only put a couple on there so far, and all my animals will be up there, and I'll be posting links to my store on there. But super excited to, again, work with Mickey and really appreciate his support for the podcast. So thank you. And then, last but not least, before we get started tonight and say what's up to a couple people in the chats, so hard to choose. Hashtag Colubrid Corruption of the Week. Oh boy. Oh boy. There's some good stuff on here, that's for sure. Just a matter of what we will choose. So I'm scrolling through right now. Let's see. This is a nice one. We'll show this one off. This one is from Picture It Pythons. Thanks for sharing this on here. It's a California red-sided garter. Actually, it's a 1.2 group, so it's a few of them. Really nice, high-quality photos, some quality colubrids. Go check out their page. Shout out to Picture It Pythons. Yeah, super cool animals. All right, and then quickly say what's up to the other couple people that are here. Jason Keller, what is going on? Appreciate you. Mike from Solid Serpents. Hey, I want to give him a shout out too, because he took a fantastic vlog of ColubridFest, and I was on that. Did a little snippet with him. Definitely go check it out on his YouTube on Solid Serpents. Check out that video. It was a really long, like almost 50-minute vlog, which is awesome. I wish I was able to get that much content, but yeah, I was just so busy with the speaking, with the vending, and all that stuff. So yeah. But guys, without further ado, let us bring in our guest and welcome. There he is, PJ. What's up, man? How are you?
Doing well. I'm happy to see some of these familiar faces in the chat already. Some good ColubridFest buddies. So
yeah,
what's up, guys?
Definitely. And I had the pleasure of meeting you this past weekend as well. And I know I had heard and seen like your name around before, and we had followed each other on Instagram for a while, but it was really cool to meet you. You're a cool dude. So we hung out a little bit, got some lunch and stuff. So it's just a super fun weekend.
Yeah, likewise. It was sweet to be able to well, I already had your face going with your name, but there were so many people we got to meet there, just going by their online names, and actually got to put a face to it.
Definitely. All right, cool, man. So why don't we get a little started here? Obviously, again, so we're gonna recap ColubridFest, and I think you're a good person to do that with. But I kind of want to go over your history in reptiles and where you're kind of at now.
Sure thing. We'll go all the way back, and I think my story is actually a little different than most people. Most seem to have that story of like, oh, I was obsessed with dinosaurs as a kid and been keeping snakes since I was 3, but I'm actually more of a late bloomer, honestly, not really getting that interested in snakes until I was in college. I was always an animal kid. I went to like the day camp programs at our zoo growing up and wanted to be a zookeeper when I was growing up and whatnot. And everyone has that like dinosaur obsession that led into reptiles, but for me, I think it was actually Pokemon. which was my like segue, all the creatures and collecting them, and
Yep.
yeah, it tracks. So it was when I was 18, I actually got my first reptile, which was just a leopard gecko from the local pet store. And when I went to Michigan State University, I took that with me and hid it in my dorm room. Ended up actually having a fair amount of secret pets in my dorm room that none of the RAs or anything really knew about. But while I was at Michigan State, I got involved in the herpetology club there, and I got to meet a lot of other herp keepers and enthusiasts and people who were studying in that discipline as well. And so, of course, I got to know some people that had snakes and got some hands-on experience and learning more about them. And again, like my interest in snakes prior to that, and as I was growing up, there was an interest there, but there was probably a healthy dose of caution as well, because my family wasn't really into snakes, and I heard all the traditional scary things about them growing up. So that was the foundation that I had. But once I started getting that hands-on experience was when things really started to change, and the interest caused me to dive a little deeper into that. So that was my junior year of college. I got involved there. So 2012, and Snake Bites TV was huge as well. Brian Barczyk.
Yeah.
So as soon as that interest really took off, I was just all over that and learning more and getting more interested. And the summer between my junior and senior year of college, I got an internship at a nature center, and they had a fair amount of snakes and other animals in their collection that I got to care for hands-on and get more experience. And so by that point, like, I was hooked. I was a snake guy. I was a reptile guy, and yeah, there was no going back.
Yeah.
It was, let's see, my first snake I got at the March of 2012 Tinley. And my first snake was actually a rhino rat snake that, again, I took back to school with me and hid in my dorm room. So rhino rat snakes are still to this day my favorite species. They're on my logo here. I've pretty much always had them at the times that I have had reptiles. So my collection started there with that first rhino, and I eventually got a second one to go with it. And then my foundations building upon that were actually with ball pythons and crested geckos. Again, this like 2013 time frame at this point. I think the scaleless ball pythons had just gotten hatched sometime around there, so there's a lot of excitement. And again, I was watching a lot of snake bites, and I was really into the Bush League Breeders Club forums. I don't know if you've ever heard of those, or like the ballpythons.net forums back in the day. But
I've heard of ballpythons.net. Yeah. But I was a little too young for most of that stuff, and I wasn't super I didn't dive deep yet at that point. I was in 2013, I turned 13. So
sure. Yeah, but the Bush League Breeders Club, were some pretty cool forums, and one of the OG snake podcasts, Reptile Radio, was connected to that forum as well. So I was listening to that all the time, and like the old Morelia Python radio stuff. So eventually, after I had that collection for a couple of years, some life stuff happened, and for a period of time, I had sold that whole collection, and it was maybe about a year later when I was able to get some animals again, and again started with rhino rat snakes first thing, as well as some cock's-eye bamboo rats and some mandarin rats. At that point was when I got to know who Matt Most was, and like I had met him at Tinley and saw like all this other old world rat snake stuff that just really sparked my interest. So that was when my collection really started to become much more of a all colubrids and old world rat snakes, and I loved the vibrant colors, the variety within that, the cooler keeping requirements. It made for some simplicity, and I was still living in apartments at that time, so it was a little cheaper to not be racking up my electric bill in that way. And it was at the point where, let's see, I actually started breeding while I was still in apartments. I had a buddy that was moving from Michigan to California. What's up, Sam? I know he's going to listen to this, so just got to say hey. And he was downsizing his collection during that move. And from him, I got some black milk snakes and some Russian rat snakes, which are, again, some of my favorites, as well as he gifted me a young Taiwan beauty snake.
Okay.
So those species, again, started to become the foundations of my current collection, or collection at that time. And I started breeding in those apartments. And when it got to the point where I was starting to hatch babies, and I had around like 25 to 30 snakes in the apartment at that time, I started reading into the fine print of the lease and realized, like, if I got caught and they really wanted to, they could charge me $1,000 per animal that they found that I wasn't supposed to have. So I already wanted to find a house and move out of the apartments and whatnot.
I'm having this trouble right now because I'm probably moving out of my parents' house soon and moving in with my girlfriend, and we're just like looking around, and there's, whether it's complexes and places for rent and houses for rent and stuff, there's a lot of no pets on there.
Yeah.
And we're just like, I'm just kind of like, I'm stressing a bit because my collection's decent, and sure, there's some stuff I'm selling, but yeah, not really sure what's gonna happen when that time comes.
Yeah, with a small collection, you can definitely get away with it. Obviously, there's that element of risk, but I
Yeah,
remember I had one of the closets in my apartment that I had my little racks in and everything.
right.
And whenever there was like facilities maintenance or something coming from the apartment complex, I like decked this thing out to look just like a junk closet. Like I draped a tablecloth over the rack and like had like a broom laying in there. I think
Yeah,
even one of my racks, I draped something over it and then put like my laundry, like my underwear and stuff on it, as if I was like folding laundry there. Cause like maintenance guy
yeah,
hopefully is not going to want to like go through my laundry or something.
right.
So they're not going to mess with it. They're not going to catch me. But yeah, the risk was accumulating. So wanted to buy a house, ended up doing that in the summer of 2019, which as far as the housing market goes, apparently was like the perfect time before things really went crazy.
Yeah,
And then it was just, I no longer had those limits of having to worry about, facing massive fines for having snakes I wasn't supposed to have. So I could really let my collection bloom into its own there. And so those were, the species at that time I was keeping. Again, Russians, bamboos, some mandarins, Taiwan beauties, Russian rat snakes, black milk snakes, and eventually I started to dabble into Western hognose as well, getting into the morphs there.
nice.
So grew that collection, kind of established a business for a couple of years, was having really some pretty good success and loving it. Breeding my own rodents as well. I
Okay,
outfitted a shed in my yard to do my own mice and had it heated and cooled and ventilated and all
nice.
that. So was able to support most of my own food bill, which is nice to be self-sustaining in that way and just
Definitely.
have the perfect size of every feeder I needed. And live pinkies were great for picky babies, which Western hogs and rhinos, you can definitely have some of that.
Yep.
So the doom and gloom of my story comes actually last fall. I started to notice some interesting symptoms in some of my animals, some regurgitation, some inappetence, some weird feces, and long story short, it ended up being a significant Cryptosporidium serpentis outbreak, and pretty much my entire collection went from noticing the symptoms in those first couple animals to it spreading to about maybe like 2/3 of the collection within just a few weeks.
Wow.
And I'm lucky in that I work in the veterinary research industry. And so I have a lot of friends who are vets, and they were able to help me with like getting some veterinary diagnostic testing on some of my animals to get a positive diagnosis of what we were working with. And I'm sure a lot of the people listening might know quite a bit about crypto if they've listened to some of the CCR episodes or other shows that have gone over it. But in short, it's a protozoa that attacks the gastrointestinal system, or the digestive system of the snake.
Yep.
And it causes thickening in their stomach and reduces their ability to produce the stomach acids that they use to break down and digest and uptake nutrients from their food. So that's why you get a lot of, they just don't want to eat because their stomach feels awful. They'll regurgitate because they have this hunger rodent that they just can't break down. They'll sometimes pass undigested rodent bits in their feces, and essentially they'll like starve to death alive because they can't uptake the nutrients they need to keep living. Currently, it's untreatable, it's uncurable, and it just spreads really easily. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. It seems like once you have a sizable collection, no matter how much cleaning you do, those little phorid flies, the fly like fruit flies that kind of run around on the surfaces, you can get those in your collection, and those flies can actually spread this protozoa from cage to cage. It's spread fecal to oral, so these flies, they'll go run over the poop of one snake that is shedding this cryptosporidium. And then for my sizable collection, I thawed out a lot of my rodents just at room temperature in the room, because then the aromas get going and they get all eager to eat.
Yeah.
But these little flies, again, were going on the poop, and they were going on the rodents that were thawing out, and then those were just getting directly delivered right into the mouths of the snakes. So it was a very efficient delivery system. So, man, it was a hard lesson to learn. And yeah, without a doubt, I mean, I know I'm talking through it in kind of a factual and very well processed way at this point. But that was sincerely the hardest thing I can think of that I've gone through in my entire life. Because yeah, ultimately the decision, it's untreatable, it's uncurable. As soon as I had my suspicions, I locked down my collection. I wasn't selling anymore, I wasn't vending anymore, and I was going to figure out what was going on here. And ultimately the decision was to euthanize the entire collection because they were either symptomatic or heavily exposed. I know there's the option of keeping around some of the animals that weren't seeming to be heavily symptomatic and continuing to doing testing. But yeah, the decision there is those animals, essentially they could be a time bomb. An animal can be infected without actually shedding in its feces. If you really want to do effective like fecal testing with for cryptosporidium with snakes, it's best to collect a sample maybe like once every 30 days for up to 90 days or more, maybe 120 days, get 3 or 4 samples, because the animal might not always be shedding it in its feces, even if it is in its gut.
Gotcha.
So the time, the expense, and possibly just drawing out this poor quality of life for animals that would eventually become heavily symptomatic. And yeah, the decision was made to euthanize all the animals, which again, I'm very thankful to have good friends who are vets who could help me do this, with the proper drugs and sedation and things to do it ethically. But it's still one of those days that replays in my mind often, and stuff I'll never unsee. So that was a hard hit. I know at that point I just wanted to like drop off the face of the earth of reptiles entirely. I had an old Handmade Herps Instagram that I just decided to completely delete. I didn't know if I was ever going to do this stuff again. I felt like I let all those animals down. I even felt like an identity crisis at that point, because these animals were like so much a part of my life and my passion. And like I was a snake guy, and I was a reptile breeder, and that's what I did. And suddenly I had none of that. And I felt a lot of shame too. Because cryptosporidium definitely doesn't carry like a lighthearted conversation with it. And I know it can be a really scary thing for people to talk about or think about being in their collections. So I had all these worries that it was going to be like this scarlet letter in the reptile community. And I really tried to deal with it as ethically as I could, and make sure that I locked my collection down when I had the suspicions, so I didn't unknowingly affect or knowingly affect anybody else. And I'm happy to say that everyone I've talked to since I've started to reimmerse in the community has been like super empathetic and compassionate towards me, and not treating me like an outcast or whatnot. So definitely huge thanks to to everyone who's given me that kindness. And yeah, that's the big bumm.
That's really tough, man. I know we talked about it briefly last week. I would be devastated too. I wouldn't really know what to do with myself either, to be honest. Because I've put a significant portion of my life into these reptiles and caring for them and breeding them and all that stuff. So to take that kind of loss would hit me really hard. So I get it.
Sure. Yeah. So took that time off. Yeah, the Handmade Herps Instagram was gone, so that kind of cut off most of my communications with other friends I had in the community. And yeah, I found other ways to fill my time. I got some of my other hobbies. I enjoy like doing CrossFit and obstacle course races, like the Spartan races. So had a lot more time to heavily get into that, which of course had some positive benefits as well. I actually started coaching CrossFit recently.
Nice.
So I did some training for that. So yeah, it's all been really good. Filling my time. Otherwise, it is amazing. Like when you have a large collection of snakes and then suddenly none of them, a lot of available time frees up. And that was, slow but good healing time. I was also fortunate to have, good friends I could kind of disclose this stuff to early as I was going through it and get good advice from. Clint from Metazotics was actually a huge help during that time and encouragement. Just encouraging me to not be like too quick to make these big decisions of like, I'm never doing this stuff again. Like I'll never own another snake. And, he encouraged me just like take the time and heal, and like reminded me this stuff is in me for a reason. It's a passion of mine, and it's it's a part of me. And so, when I was ready to let him know, and he'd help me get immersed back into the community and get immersed back into snake keeping. And yeah, that's a great segue to ColubridFest, because that was definitely a catalyst for that. I have my personal Instagram now. It's just at PJ Kohn. And a couple months prior, I started reconnecting with some people in the snake community, yourself included, and some others who, when I followed them, they'd message me like, "Oh my gosh, you're alive!" Like people definitely seem to wonder why I just kind of dropped off the face of the earth. So that's again when I started to kind of tell some people what I'd gone through, and they were very supportive, very compassionate, and yeah, I see that happening here in the chat as well. So thank you guys for that.
I did want to, just because I do like to interact with the live chat. This question from Adam regarding the thawing of rodents. The correct way would have been to not thaw any rodents in the same room, correct? Like, I guess if you see symptoms, perhaps.
So let's see. I guess if the room you were thawing them in didn't have those forward flies flying around, then maybe. I think that even though I prefer doing the room temp thawing, a lot of people thaw them out in warm water, and those flies aren't going to be going into the water. So potentially that's a good way to eliminate the risk of those flies getting onto the rodents prior to them being ingested.
Right. Yeah, which is what I do as well. I use water to do
I just hate all the paper towels you go through having to dry those puppies off after you thaw them out.
Yeah.
I don't like throwing them in there all sopping wet and getting them like caked in bedding and whatnot.
Right. Yeah. All right. Cool. So again, I'm sorry for that. Again, we talked about it last week, but that's quite unfortunate. But it was really good to see you at ColubridFest, given all that has happened. And it's interesting to jump right back into such a big event with a lot of camaraderie, and probably seeing people you haven't talked to in quite some time, even on social media and whatever. So let's kind of get your take. I mean, what actually, and I know you were with one of the vendors, but what actually inspired you to come to the event in the first place?
Yeah, so it had been a couple months prior that I was like starting to really get excited again. I did actually make it to March Tinley just for a day trip out there and got
Okay.
to reconnect with a couple people and um, yeah, started breaking down those walls and those feelings of like, oh, everybody's going to think I'm a terrible person. And I started to dabble with some other like kind of passion project species that I never really would have thought of before. So I got some like red-eyed crocodile skinks,
Okay.
which are super cool. I never see them, they have this nice planted humid box and they're in there somewhere living their life. And I got a Pac-Man frog and an African bullfrog. So just these fun little
Nice.
things. So was letting that passion start to like burn inside of me again. And
Right.
I knew that I still had that deepest passion for colubrids. I just had kind of a little hesitation of like knowing that Cryptosporidium does affect colubrids much more heavily than some of these other species I was interested in keeping. I was like, man, am I gonna set myself up for this again and just get hurt all over again? It really I was really hit by the mortality of what we do. When we hear it
Yeah.
all the time, when you work with life, you deal with death, and it's an inevitable part of it. But um, yeah, I just had some hesitations on whether I was really ready to get back into it and open my heart back up to it, essentially. But what I did know is I had seen that the people in this community were good, and even if ColubridFest was just an opportunity to go and get to see some animals and meet some of these people and again, put some faces with the names and make some new friends, that sounded well worthwhile to me.
Yeah.
I also didn't have a crazy like 35-hour drive through a hurricane like you did or whatever. It was a 3.5-hour drive for me, and
Yeah.
it was kind of a no-brainer in that way. So low barrier to entry, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, for those who don't know, I did drive. The drive total, like the actual driving time, is about somewhere in the range of 16 to 17 hours. And I was driving with a hurricane on my tail, so I had rain the entire way there. So that wasn't super fun. But once I was there, I was like, all right, it's time to have fun this weekend, and sure did a lot of that. Yeah, so day one, get there for setup and stuff. Just starting to hang out with a bunch of people, set up the whole display. And how do you know it's Scott, right? That's who you
Yeah.
came with? Yeah, so is he just up in your area and you decided to tag along with him, or what was the deal with that?
Yeah, so Scott Hitchcock of Scott's Great Snakes. I actually met him at Tinley. He's been a Tinley vendor for years.
Okay.
He keeps a lot, really diverse collection, everything from um, Woma and black-headed pythons to black
Yeah.
rat snake morphs and a bunch of hognose, other colubrids. Really cool guy. And so I met him at Tinley when he was vending and was just small talking with the vendor, just like always, and realized that we lived a half an hour away from each other up in Southwest Michigan. So,
Nice.
yeah, stayed friends with him over the years since I met him. And when I knew ColubridFest was happening and like I was booking my hotel, first off, those downtown hotels were not super cheap. So I'm like, I need roommates. So I reached out to Scott and a couple other friends to see if I could get someone to get in on a room with me. And Scott was down to go and actually down to vend as well. So yeah, we
Nice.
split a room and helped him out with loading his animals around, which was a task all on its own. As
Yeah.
I know that convention center was just absolutely massive, and yeah, there
Massive.
was really no well set up loading area, so it involved carting or carrying animals quite a long ways.
Yeah. Um, no, and as for the hotel, I stayed on the outskirts of downtown. So I stayed at a place right near the airport. Actually, I was like right next to the airport. And I got it for very cheap. And it was like I don't know, a 12 to 15-minute drive to the venue. So I was like, whatever, like that's, fine. And yeah, so that first day kind of loading in, I pulled up a little bit before everyone, and then Clint gets there and we're trying to figure out where to load in, and then he's going in and talking to them, and then they set us up at this loading bay, and it's like a quarter-mile walk one way, just from basically the car to the room. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, are you joking? I had to make 2 trips. Luckily, on the way out, I was a little more strategic with the way I packed up my cart, that like I got everything on the cart on one time. But man, I was just like, that was hell. But it worked out in the end. We got everything there.
Yeah, Scott and I opted to stay a little bit, a much closer hotel in the downtown area. Actually has like that skywalk network, so we didn't even have to walk outside from our hotel getting over to the convention center. But yeah, it was still a bit of a trek. Luckily, he did have a cart for all his supplies, but it was like from the parking garage, up an elevator, through a lobby and a Starbucks, down another elevator, all through that convention center network. And I think, yeah, that was about a 3/4 mile walk overall. But
yeah, it was a good distance. And then we met that day. When you got there, you introduced yourself, and I don't know what it is with people who have their, like, I don't look at people's profile pictures if it's just their face, so I almost didn't recognize you. I thought you looked different for whatever reason. I was just like, oh, that's PJ. Okay, cool. And I know I had listened to your episode on CCR back when you did that, so like I knew who you were. But it was just super cool starting to meet these people in person who I only knew from online or from Instagram and whatever. So
yeah, for sure. And there were plenty of individuals that I hadn't even known from online. Yeah, Mike and Adam are in the chat, and those are 2 guys that did a great job being social. I've been going to like Tinley's since 2012, and I've just always been a bit more of like a wallflower there, and it's such a big show. And I've made my close friends there and see the people I'm used to, but really bad about stepping out of my comfort zone to just go chat up someone new and meet people. So ColubridFest was a great opportunity to, one, know that it was a smaller group, and I could step out of my comfort zone for that. But 2, I didn't have to guess if the person that I was meeting was like into the same kind of reptiles and whatnot that I was. We were all there for that same collective colubrid passion, so it made it a little easier.
Definitely. All right. And then kind of going over, so obviously that mixer was super fun. A bunch of people started getting there, as the day went on, more and more people, and obviously just a whole load of talking, having cool conversations. But then we get to day 2, where it was the talks and the panels and whatnot. Going into it, so I, like, my perspective, I was on one of the panels, so I was just kind of like half nervous, but like I was also intrigued by the other panels, so I was super interested to listen and all that stuff. But what were your expectations going in for the panels? Because I'm assuming you saw like the schedule ahead of time and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I saw the titles, and I heard it was going to be like a little bit of like a little lecture time and a little panel discussion time. And I hadn't ever been to such a long like reptile related talk day, but I've gone to like conferences for work or other things that if they were at that same duration, because we started at what, 9 and then ended around like 5:30, and there was a lunch break in between. But if it was for like any other type of seminar or topics, I would have a hard time believing that I could actually be engaged that whole time. But the time flew by, man. Those were super engaging talks. The attendees did a great job at asking like interesting questions, and just making it really conversational. It was a pretty big group of people, but it all felt like everybody was equally engaged, which just made the time fly by. The topics were great. John kicked it off talking about picky babies, which again,
Yep.
working with rhino rats and hognose in the past, that was definitely relatable, and I even picked up some tips there. I think.
I am before we go on, I am curious when it comes to like rhino rats for you and your experience with hatchlings. Did you used to have to do the whole rosy red stuff like in the water bowl, and then try to get them onto pinks eventually, or what was kind of your tactics there?
Yeah, I tried a variety of things, and ultimately the rosy reds were my go-to just because of how hands-off it was.
Right.
I think they do well with low stress and low stimulation, so that just kind of left them with this good moving prey that they seemed to be interested in, and it was easy to set up that water bowl with just a couple fish, and then eventually you put the frozen thawed pinky in with the fish, and they take it all, and after a while you can stop putting the fish in there, just the pinky in the water, and they take that. But I know there's a lot of discussion about like, oh, the fish can be full of parasites and they're nasty, and
Yeah.
which is maybe true to some level. In most cases, that's going to be very, very low risk of actually affecting your animal. But I did, prior to deciding I wanted to try the fish, I tried the whole like handling them and the strike feeding method where you
Right.
hold them
Right.
like right in the middle of their body. Terry Burwell has a great video on YouTube
Kind of like
of doing
Frino
this. You can track
Nax.
that down. Yeah, and you just kind of like pester them with it until you
Piss
get
them
them to
off. Yeah.
strike, and eventually you just hope that that strike lands. They're super tiny snakes, so that strike has to land with the pinky's nose going like right into the
Yep.
back of their
Pretty
mouth, and
much.
then you just freeze and you try not to move for like the next 10 to 20 minutes, and if you like even tweak your eyebrow, like they'll
That's
drop
it.
it.
Let
That's
go.
happened so many times, and I mean they'll have this thing like 3/4 of the way down and suddenly decide you're looking at them funny, and they'll just spit it back out and be done with it. So a
Yeah.
lot of time used and a lot of frustration with that method. So yeah, the rosy reds are just so hands off and simple.
Yeah, I mean, I look towards breeding rhinos eventually. I am the minnows and just them being tough makes me like a little nervous. Not like I'm going to be trying to pull something out of the book that no one else has done, but I'm hoping it's smooth for me
Yeah.
and it's just as easy as the minnows, and
Yeah, I don't
eventually.
think I ever had any that didn't start eating eventually.
Okay.
So some of them just take a long time, but just know that going into it. And if you're going to
Yeah.
do the minnows, just stick to the system. Try not to stress them out. Um, they'll come around when they're ready. And yeah,
Cool.
once they've got a couple months of eating under their belt, they're just absolutely bulletproof.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely learned that with I picked up like a hatchling last year, and he was a little weird during his quarantine phase. And then once I put him into like the rack with everything else, he took off and was like phenomenal. So I was like, okay, you just needed to kind of be in the rest of the ambient environment. I have everything else in down here. So
Yeah, I guess that's a real challenge with breeding them and working with the babies is all too often I'd get a baby like plenty well established. It was strike feeding off the tongs every time, and I felt confident to sell it up to to its new owner, its next home, and the baby gets shipped, and then it like never wants to eat after that. Not never, but it just takes a lot
right.
of getting them back in the swing of it because that's a lot of change. They're used to the enclosures I had them in, and
Yeah.
they've got a
Yeah.
whole new setup, a new stimulation, and um, they've become a much more popular snake. A lot of people were just getting them as pets, and again, it was my first pet snake, and I was lucky that the
Yep.
baby I got was a solid frozen thawed pinky eater. But a lot of people are coming in with not a ton of picky snake experience, and that leads to a lot of anxiety of, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I got this new snake and it didn't eat the first week I got it, so it's probably going to die. When in reality, if it's got a healthy amount of weight on it, it can go for multiple months without eating and be okay if it eventually does get on feed. So yeah, you just gotta know the tricks and trust the process and wait for that baby to come around.
Cool. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think people, I've mentioned this before. I think people are too quick to like freak out if their animal misses a meal or it doesn't take its first meal when
Yeah.
you get a new animal. It's like there's these things, especially when they're established. I get it as babies, like the little freak out, and even then you sometimes you just have a slow starter. But
Right.
when when an animal is established, it's like, hey, even if it doesn't take its first couple meals, it's like probably going to be okay. It might just have to figure things out for a little bit longer, but I don't know. I think people stress out and go to the extremes a little too quickly on stuff like
Yeah.
that.
And that actually in the talk that John gave on getting picky babies to eat, was one of the panel questions was like, what's some bad advice that you might commonly hear about getting picky babies to eat? And it was just that idea of trying too much too fast.
Yeah.
Again, if they're not eating because they're stressed for some reason or feeling overstimulated, the less you can do, and essentially like the more you can just not care about it and just trust the process and stick with it, the better chance you have of those babies having success of coming around and eventually eating. But when you're trying all these different prey items and scenting techniques and hitting them in the face with it, and then they're just overwhelmed and much less likely to come around.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Yeah, John gave a great talk. I really enjoyed it, and though I don't keep any species currently that are tough eaters or tough to get started, or I haven't dealt with any of that yet, but like I'm keeping it in the back of my head for the day I do, for
Sure.
sure.
One of
Cool.
my other favorite talks was the veterinary talk on egg binding,
Yeah.
dystocia. Yeah, that's definitely something I had happen a couple times in my own collection. And so yeah, it's really cool to hear about prevention being the best cure and the ways that we can just set our snakes up better to
Yeah.
give them opportunities for more natural nesting behavior and better health going into that egg laying, so they're much less likely to face those problems at all. And the dark egg boxes were the biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
I think I'll just use whatever kind of sterilites or clear tubs we have laying around, but they're not laying their eggs in daylight and in nature. So if they don't have the opportunity to go somewhere dark and lay them safely, they're going to be more likely to put off that laying because they want their eggs to be safe. So dark egg box encourages them to lay sooner and
Yep.
increase the likelihood they'll have a successful lay.
Yeah, and it's definitely something I'm going to take into my own collection. Also, nutrition wise, I've never been one to supplement my stuff, but I'm definitely going to be getting some. If I don't already, and I might have some on hand, but like I definitely want to start supplementing with extra calcium and like D3,
Yep.
all my frozen thawed rodents and stuff, especially my females, at the very least, to make sure they have that correct calcium intake so they can properly produce the eggs and not be too physically exhausted from it. Because what he describes it, which I didn't realize, how they like literally pull all the calcium, like even from their bones sometimes, and that's it was really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of good talks in there, and we I did a recap episode with CCR and Kayla, and we kind of dove deep into all of them. So if you guys want to hear that, I don't want to take up too much time diving into every single one of them. The one thing I did not say, and I think I sparked the idea for this, like without them maybe knowing. So I had Kayla on my show, and if they're listening to this, I don't know, you could give me credit if you want to. I had Kayla on my show, and that was specifically one of the topics we went over, and it was the first time I asked it. It's like, hey, what's it like being a woman in a male-dominated hobby? We had a whole discussion about it, and a lot of the points she brought up during that talk, she spoke about on the show, and it wasn't something I had ever heard anyone else ask in the podcast. So that's where I think the idea came from, though maybe I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was a good conversation to have for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, just to touch on one more moment that I think really impacted me in those talks. The talk that you and the Zirkles and Mickey gave on the past, present, and future of the colubrid hobby. Again, I was just starting to really immerse myself back into this community after having gone through what I went through with my loss. And Rob Zirkle, the Zirkles are both individuals I've looked up to for years. You know, they keep a lot of the same stuff that I've been interested in. Their table is always a must go to at Tinley when I'm there, and I make a few passes. And Rob didn't go into great detail, but he mentioned something about years ago he experienced some significant like loss or tragedy in his collection, and he was just ready to be done with it, thought he'd never have another animal again. But the kindness of someone else in the community gave him a couple pairs of snakes that were just absolutely like right up his alley, things he was really interested in and valuable at that time. And the kindness of that person revived him and got him interested again. And if that didn't happen, there's no way he would have the collection that he has today and getting to work with all the animals that he has helped bring to us in the hobby as well, because they certainly have stuff on their table that you don't find it anywhere else.
Yeah.
So that was super inspiring. Honestly, I was getting like choked up just listening to that. Being able to know that someone out there that I looked up to had gone through something similar, and I'm sure that there's plenty of people out there who experienced significant losses in their collections, and it can be really hard to get over or think that things are ever going to be right again. But yeah, the community of ColubridFest, the community that we have here in this chat as well. I kept thinking that over the weekend with ColubridFest was like, we came for the animals, but I think we all found like the people were what was keeping us there.
Oh yeah, definitely. And yeah, just to talk about the talk I was on a little bit, I really want to watch it back because when I was in the moment talking, like I almost felt like I was babbling and I didn't want to say the wrong things and like talk like over talk because there were like 5 of us speaking or 5 or 6 of us speaking at once. But Zach and Clint apparently said I hit some nails on the head and stuff they were able to kind of further work on. But yeah, it's super interesting, and even seeing the room around me and still being one of the youngest people in the room, especially one that had a table there on that panel. Like I really think we need to like push more to get that younger generation involved, or else like I don't know. I feel like especially over the last few years with COVID and stuff and with adults trying to find new hobbies, like a lot of adults have streamed into the hobby, but it's still super important to get that young crowd to be a part of it. And I was actually thinking about this today. Like I'm almost debating asking Zach if he'd like me to do almost a solo panel next year. And maybe he'll say no to this, and that's fine because it's kind of a reiteration of what I did. But like just talking about navigating the ropes of being a young person in the hobby and how to actually get started with a collection and kind of set you up for some sort of track of success, and I think we need more of that because again, I just like besides the couple kids that were in the room, there just weren't many people younger than me, at least to my knowledge.
Yeah, no, that was definitely noticeable. And yeah, what you said about giving some guidance to like help set them on a track and give them some focus. Obviously, the focus needs to be whatever they are particularly interested in.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, with all these all over social media, they're getting all this, this species, that species. It can or all the conflicting information or the debates and whatnot. It can definitely be good to have some more focused information coming their way to help them navigate all that.
Yeah, definitely. And another talk I want to give definite highlight to is Matt's, because and I talked about this on CCR, but Matt is someone I've looked up to for years. His collection, I talk about Matt all the time on here, but his collection is incredible. Seeing his animals back when I was in my mid-teens is what like inspired me to want to have at least some of the collection I have today. And I'm able to have some of these Asian rat snakes in my collection, and I've gotten some animals from Matt. So it was super cool to meet him in person. He was very nice in person, and obviously I've talked to him a bunch over the years, but then he also gave me, some kind of like inspiring words about, the track I'm on with my collection, and it kind of going back to what I'm doing. He's like, hey man, you got to stay focused. Cause I said, oh, you brought Grabowski eye for the auction. He's like, he basically nodded at me. He was like, don't even think about bidding on those. He's like, you don't have them. He's like, focus on what you have and get your stuff breeding, like what you have. Without saying that, he basically said that. And yeah, so in, even talking about like the Texas rat snakes I have, because a lot of the stuff we see are hybridized animals, are just not the highest quality. And I know I am working with some quality. He's like, you have to preserve this, man. Like, this is important for herpetoculture, because we might like lose, these quality animals. And like, you and Kevin are doing a great job at that. And I was like, oh shit. Like, he's like, you're kind of right. So, kind of gave me a new mindset, really, to not be on this. And I'm always going through phases and like new animals that I want, but like it kind of gave me this focus to be like, okay, maybe I should like chill, buckle down, and really focus on what I have currently, get these animals grown up, and focus on breeding what I have, and then look to expand. Because I think if I just try to do too many things at once, I'm gonna lose focus, and it's not gonna be the most optimal thing, So
Yeah.
I kind of took that conversation to heart. And then that even goes with his, starting a project stuff, talking about rare species. Like, I'd love to do that one day. And ever since he kind of made this comment on THN, the Herpetoculture Network, like he did an episode with them a few months back, but I was like, man, that would be really cool to establish a new or rarer species in captivity. So hearing that and kind of retaining that information in my head is definitely something I'll be looking towards in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, he's a wise and inspiring guy in this
Yes.
hobby. He's yeah, I've gotten to know him over the years as well, and always so he's great at giving that guidance, and he's done so much within this hobby. And with what I've gone through as well, he's been super compassionate, and obviously he's not experienced like a disease related loss like I have. But in that talk, he talked about how when you're establishing a species, you have to bring in every single animal
That you could
that you
possibly
get your
get.
hands on, and expect that like over 80% of them are going to die, because these wild caught animals are just so hard to establish. Like, so knowing that, like, he's certainly someone who's experienced big losses. And yeah, just I really respect the contributions that he's given to the hobby and the species that we have. And yeah, when he talks about the stuff that he's worked with and these establishing these species, obviously he's got a personal curiosity and interest in them, but it's almost like he also feels this duty to make sure that these species are available to us, available to the community, and that they're established in captivity for their own sake, for the sake of future conservation in captivity. So yeah, that was a great talk from Matt.
And besides, keeping them in herpetoculture, sometimes it's keeping the species like alive in general, because some of these things, between like deforestation and all that stuff, some of these things can get wiped off the planet. And then it's like, if we only have a very limited amount in captive hands, it's like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. Along with other animals that are in countries that we can't import from and things like that, it's just like we're working with such finite numbers that it's hard. I've talked to a couple people, especially recently. I think it was my last episode with Kristen from Stygian Exotics about the Colugnathus species, and like we can't get most of those. And the Helena is the most common one, and she has the I'm forgetting it off the top of my head, the Montane subspecies, and it's like she has a pair, I think, but like she can't find any more, and it's just it's these species that we really can't get, so it's incredibly important. that talk brought a lot of light, and it's, a lot of it is preservation, both in the hobby and in the world sometimes. So, yeah. Are you good? Can you hear me? Are you
Yeah.
frozen?
Oh no,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
good.
Okay. All right.
Man,
Cool.
it's again super late for me. I'm staying up partying with you, but I'm
No,
only up
no.
at 5:30 or 4:30 to head to the gym. So, but we're here
Yeah,
for it.
I'm with you there. Cool. And then, yeah, so I guess that kind of brings us to day 3, the expo. So you kind of saw the setup and stuff, and obviously all the vendors who were there. What were your expectations just as a spectator going into it?
Yeah, it was really hard to judge or have a thought ahead of time of just how big it was going to be, how many vendors were going to be there. Because I'm used to like my smaller local shows, and then Tinley is the next one that I go to most
Right.
frequently, and obviously it's not going to be that big. But it was delightful at just how high the concentration of super interesting stuff was. And I
Yeah.
mean, not just the high concentration, but like everything was worth looking at. Like I still love going to these other expos, but the ball python game is very cool. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there. They're cool animals, but you can just only walk by so many tables full of ball pythons and even look closely at so many before it just all starts to kind of look at the same at an expo if that's not what you're there looking for.
Yep.
And yeah, if I'm walking through Tinley, even see like one corn snake on a table, like I'm there and I'm zoned in for 10 minutes and like, oh, whoa, a colubrid. So when every single table was like that, it's I had the thought like, man, this is gonna completely ruin me for any other expos. Because yeah, you could just
I agree.
go table to table, look super closely at every animal, um, see stuff you're interested in, see stuff you've never seen before. So that was a treat.
Yeah. And as much as I'd love to keep vending that show and be a part of ColubridFest as it is, I hope next year I'm able to get a better look at the room, like
Yeah,
either before the show starts or whatever, because I just did not get a good chance to really focus in and like talk to other vendors about their animals. And like I said at the beginning, that's kind of reflected in the video I recorded. It's kind of unfortunate because I wish I got a better chance to look and focus. And I got to talk to a couple people here and there, but I didn't, it was just kind of brief scanning over some tables and not a lot of ability to actually focus and be curious about certain animals.
yeah. There were some cool people there, some rich conversation and some good stories. So that was
Yeah.
definitely one of the best parts about it. Because again, got to know these people, the social mixers and whatnot, and through the weekend, and then getting to actually see their animals and see those animals they were talking about on Friday, and that was very cool.
Yeah. Mike Kosicki said he's got a female rhino rat that he's hoping
Yep.
will go
Yeah.
next
What's
year.
up, Mike? Glad to hear she's doing well. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's another really like uplifting part of this whole thing of what I've gone through, both online I've gotten to reconnect with, and at ColubridFest got to see a couple people who had gotten animals from me in the past. You know, Phil, you
Yeah.
mentioned
Yeah.
at the start, he like tapped me on the back on Friday night and was like, "Wait, are you PJ? I got this Taiwan Beauty from you a while back,"
Yeah.
and he was a cool guy. So it was awesome to get to meet him. And then Cassidy and Travis Fox from Mid American Reptile, they were there and
Yeah.
had gotten a black milk snake from me years ago. And so it was
Nice.
great to hear that snake is doing well, but also just getting to meet these people. And yeah, everybody was so awesome, so nice. And I'm excited for next year, man. Just go back and see even these same people.
Hell yeah. Yeah, for sure. What was a table? What was your favorite table at the show? And then
Oh man.
if you don't want to concentrate to a table, then perhaps the most interesting snake or a favorite snake that you saw at the show.
That's That's a tough one, man, because I'm in that phase, being that I don't really have many animals right now. My curiosity and interests have just been like pinging all over the place.
Right.
So I guess I'll just give you a couple highlights and totally ignore your rules to follow, or to narrow it down to just
No,
one.
go for
I
it.
know
Go
the
for
people
it.
want to know what's out there. So Boss Hogs had a super cool table. Pituophis have like sparked an interest for me recently, and he had some really awesome bull snakes and hognose.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, getting to see some of those bulls up close. Trying to remember, Reptile Collective along the front also had some really nice northern pines. The Ocean County, New Jersey, with the
Yeah.
high black and white. Um, I had never seen so many rain rat snakes in my entire
Oh yeah.
life.
I've
Goniosoma
never seen
frenatum.
any
They're like
in
the
person.
rhino rat snakes without the horns, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think in the past I've maybe seen a couple at the Zirkles table at Tinley, but like they had one. Um, the Cold Blooded Cafe table had some subadult males, and then Kevin Pollock had like 2 clutches of rain rats or something. And yeah, come to think of it, concentrating down to the species that I've like enjoyed the most, I'm gonna give that favorite table to Kevin Pollock from KP Exotics, because he had the rain rats, he had all the Porphyracea, he had Russian rats, which
Yeah.
again are like one of my absolute favorites. He had some really interesting king rats, so it was
Yeah.
it was all there.
It's it's an interesting show when you see 3 out of the 4 common no, I'm sorry. What is it? Out of 5? You saw 3 Goniosoma species
Oh
on
yeah, yep.
at the expo. Um 4 would be Oxycephalum, no Janseni, obviously,
Hmm.
and Margaritatum is like not captive bred yet. So, but no, it was super cool because you really don't see rain rats, and then Kayla obviously had the Prasinum there.
Yeah,
Uh,
yep.
it's just one species you don't see commonly, and then let alone at the same show at the same time. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was exciting. It was good stuff.
yeah. Yeah, I would just wish I got a better chance to look around. I did not buy anything. Surprisingly, I did bid on a couple stuff at the auction because obviously, it's going to reptile conservation, so
Hmm.
why not? Um, but yeah, so super super cool. And then yeah, wrap up the expo. I thought was fantastic. I mean, I know it's been reiterated a bunch of times, but like the ratio of people walking in the door to people walking out the door with deli cup or cups in their hand was fantastic. One of the best I've ever seen at any show ever. Um, so like overall, I really think year 1 was a success, and I've been plastering this all over. But like year 2, genuinely, I think is going to double, if not
Yeah,
more, in size and crowd and all facets possible.
for sure.
It's
I
going to
hope
be
so.
great.
Yeah, I've already pinged back to a couple friends that wanted to make it this time around but weren't able to, and hopefully we're doing a good enough job of building the
Yeah.
hype that like plan ahead. I'm sure they'll get those dates nailed down and that exact
Well,
location nailed
yeah.
down as early as possible, but do what you can to be there if you're going to pick one show for 2025.
Oh yeah.
I don't think you'd regret having it be ColubridFest.
Yep. Um, Especially if I'm up in New York at this time already, I may fully forego Daytona. I mean, at that point, Daytona is not a backyard show for me anymore. Just forego that and do the road trip again to Colubrid Fest,
Hmm.
which is a much shorter road trip. But yeah, I mean, definitely. So obviously, like we're kind of implying that this was put together much faster. Like it was only really nailed down a few months ago. Whereas this time around, I know they are actively already planning it and trying to figure it out. I think step number 1 from the conversation I had with them is potentially a different venue.
Hmm.
So I think once that gets locked down, like they're gonna have dates, and we're gonna find out very, very soon when Colubrid Fest 2025 is. So
Nice.
yeah. Yeah, so as we kind of wrap that up, I am curious to hear. So you mentioned Pituophis, but as you kind of reflect back from ColubridFest, where does this kind of put you now in the hobby? Does it, is it just kind of you think a slow creep kind of back into it, or you think you're gonna jump head in, or?
Yeah. So there's what my my heart wants, or what my distracted brain wants, and then there's what would actually be the responsible way to go about it. Similar to the advice that Matt gave you about, just focus, especially as I'm getting back into things. It'd be very wise of me to try to take it slow and focus. So I know that rhino rats and Russian rats are things I'm absolutely going to want back, and actually I'm glad to say that I actually was already able to make that happen. I've got a good buddy, Andy, who had a pair of holdback rhino rat snakes that he was letting go.
Nice.
And so I was able to get those from him a few weeks ago. And then Kevin Pollock gave me a really good deal on female Russian rat snake. So I've got her now. And
Awesome.
I mentioned earlier when I was going through everything with the crypto and I wasn't sure if I'd ever want to be back in this. Clint was a real encouragement to me, and he let me know, like, when you're ready, buddy, let me know and I'll hook you up with some starter babies. So Clint very graciously sent me home with a pair of Baird's rat snakes, which are one that I had
Awesome.
never kept before, but had always been highly recommended. And so I'm excited to mess around with those. And this was the first show where I got to see like a lot of scaleless corn snakes. I've never got to mess around with those. And again, the bigger show that I normally go to is Tinley in Illinois. They don't. I guess I have occasionally seen some scaleless corns there, but they're not supposed to have them legally.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's treading the thin ice there.
But there were in Indiana, all fair game. So there were plenty of scaleless corns at this show. And I was looking at Cassidy and Travis's table, Mid-American Reptile, and they had this one little pet-only scaleless corn that had like a little kink by the tail. And I'm like, yeah, those are cool. I'd love to just like have one someday. And they're like, just take it, bud, and have fun with it. And so they sent me home with that little scaleless corn, which is super cool. I'm excited to see grow. And so again, the kindness community just helping me out at this time, helping to rekindle this passion of mine. And that's exactly what they did it for. Kevin cut me that deal on that Russian. He said, I just want to see you back in the Russians, man. He's passionate about them and knew I was, and Clint as well. Just such a big heart and a huge help. So can't thank those guys all enough.
Yeah, the community, it was very apparent from the show how strong the Colubrid community is. I see in a lot of other circles in the hobby, ball pythons, where that's not the case. There's a lot of beef. There's a lot of, talking behind people's back, but like it's really just not like that with the Colubrids. It's like that. The energy at the show was amazing. The camaraderie was really cool. To my knowledge, there was no hidden beef, and if there was, people kept it to themselves and did not bring it out, because I did not witness 1 ounce of drama at that show. And that's having a bunch of reptile keepers in the same room for 3 days straight. So sometimes people with egos, it's hard to keep that in check, but there was zero at that show, at the event. So it was just super awesome. And the Colubrid community is strong. So if you have not joined, you should consider getting into Colubrids, because I know I have some non-Colubrid keeper listeners. And if you didn't get a chance to go to ColubridFest, you should 1,000% consider it. And you should just go. It's not even a consideration. Just go.
Yeah, I would second that. Like, even if you have no Colubrids, even if you are not currently a part of the Colubrid community, again, I knew very few people going into it. It really had that like summer camp friends vibe, where like Friday evening, a bunch of us were just getting to know each other, all kind of like I don't know any of these people, kind of nervous. And then
Yeah.
by the end of the Sunday, it was like we were this newly networked family, and like, lifelong friendships were made, and we were all united, and
Yep.
it was a very, very power packed weekend for bonding.
Definitely. Definitely. Cool. Yeah, so I guess this wasn't our typical episode. So obviously I'm very excited to see you back into the hobby, and I really hope everything goes super smooth and well for you, and hopefully now you have a newfound community of people, and obviously people still here have your back, so it's super super great to see. um but yeah, what's your, I guess we'll kind of leave off on this. What's your kind of message to someone who's either had a similar situation like you, or someone who just hasn't made the jump yet to the colubrid world? What's kind of your elevator pitch to get in or get back in?
Yeah, so I guess advice to, maybe anyone that's experienced a loss or a big life change or something they're just hesitant about getting back in. Like, one, just make sure you do like take that time to heal, and remember like why you had that passion in the first place, and let yourself just have that curiosity as a tool that helps you heal. I got to say, like having baby snakes at home again, the first time I got to see them like eat a pinky mouse off the tongs and just watching a baby snake eat, that was like soul reviving. This stuff is like so common when you have so many snakes, but you take it for granted when you just miss out on those simple moments. So, um, yeah, if you're not passionate about this stuff, man, this is a weird hobby to get into. So if you're here, you're passionate about it. So don't forget that. Like, don't let the hurdles and the pains of life make you think that you can't come back around to it, because the animals are always going to be there. Your collection may change over time. You may experience some big losses, but if the passion's there, you're still going to be able to find fulfillment in it. And yeah, this community, Colubrid community, I got to know over that weekend, and fantastic people. They want to. I just saw Kevin Barron in the chat. What's up,
Yeah,
Kevin? Kevin, you got to come to ColubridFest next year as well. I hope to see you there.
I know he was like half planning on it, but yeah, I would have liked to see him there.
Yep. But yeah, colubrids just overall as a species. I've talked to a lot of ball python people who are like seeing what's going on with colubrids and think it's interesting. Again, like nothing against the ball python game. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there. And there's a whole diversity of morphs. So in some way you have diversity there, but you don't get the same diversity just in playing a big morph game as you do with natural history and species specific behaviors
Oh
that you can
yeah.
get really delving into these colubrid species. So yeah, there's just so much to explore there.
And
again,
as the name implies, I've helped corrupt a few ball python
yes,
keepers.
yep,
A couple friends of mine. One was actually like on the fence of coming. He would have came to ColubridFest with me because I was looking for someone to drive with me, but he had prearranged stuff going on, so it was unfortunate he couldn't. But I know there's people out there, the ones who are truly passionate about the animals, is like they're gonna see the light of looking into different species eventually. It's just a matter of when they decide to take the jump.
yeah. And there's so
There's some
many that
people,
are so easy to keep, so inexpensive
yeah,
to try out. Like, I encourage those people, just like find one of these low barrier to entry species and just get one as a pet. There's a lot that probably even have pretty similar husbandry to ball pythons, so they
yep,
could keep them in similar setups to what they have, and yeah, just see where that curiosity takes you. It could even totally revive your passion for all of your snakes, for ball pythons, if things have felt a little stale there or whatnot. So
yeah,
get yourself some colubrids, guys.
yeah, 100%. I always say diversity is important. I think keeping and learning. Anytime you keep a new species, you're always going to learn from it. There's something new to learn. So yeah, Definitely. Well, I know you have an early morning, and so do I during the week, but I don't want to hold you too long. I think this was a fantastic conversation. I appreciate your honesty about the whole situation. I know we talked about it. I'll let the people know we talked about it beforehand, and we wanted to figure out how to kind of navigate it. But in the end, PJ decided to kind of just speak the truth, which is
yeah, not gonna lie, I wasn't nervous going into it. Again, there's always that feeling of like, are people gonna think I'm a terrible person or whatnot? But yeah, it happened. I learned a lot from it. Unfortunately, wish I didn't have to go through it, but I'm hoping that my story and what I learned can help others. And yeah, it's shown me
I think there's people that can go through it and be a bad person or a
deal
bad
with it
keeper.
differently. Yeah.
But then there's someone like you who was so genuinely passionate about it and trying to get back into it that, you could always tell that difference. And at least from my perspective, I can see that like you really, really care. And that hit you really, really hard when you told me that story. So,
yeah.
And you wouldn't have been at ColubridFest if it didn't matter to you. So,
right.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. We had a bunch of people in here tonight. There's like 10 viewers now. There were a bunch of people hopping in and out. What do you have to say to everyone who is in the live chats tonight? Anyone who's going to listen to this later on or on their drive to work or whatnot?
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for tuning in the live chat or even for listening back. If you guys have any follow-up questions or anything about my experience with crypto, and again, I'm hoping that I can use it as a learning opportunity for people. So if you want to reach out, best way to get a hold of me right now is Instagram's the only social media I'm using. So I'm at PJ Kohn.
I have it in
all one
the
word there.
description.
Perfect. Yep. Yeah. So feel free to reach out. Also want to mention I will be hanging out at Tinley all weekend next weekend. So even though it's not ColubridFest, we can still have a little Colubrid community time there. So if you guys are going to be there, reach out. I'd love to meet you. Love to hang out, or love to see you again.
Hell yeah. And I'll see you at ColubridFest next year.
Absolutely.
All right. Cool, man. I will throw you backstage. I'll run this outro and we'll talk for a couple minutes after. That's cool.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, man.
Yep.
All right, guys. What another great episode of the Colubrid Corruption podcast. Yeah, guys, honestly, was pretty excited for this one. I was looking for a person who could give a good back and forth of what happened at ColubridFest. And I thought PJ would be a good guy for it just because of his perspective and where he's at now. I figured that event would he would see it a little bit different than someone who was putting the event together and stuff. And, I had Zach and Clint on talking about it beforehand. So I thought he'd be a great candidate for afterwards. And overall, he has a great track record as a keeper, and a lot of people can vouch for him. So, and it was great meeting him last weekend. But yeah, guys, as usual, this was episode number 39 of the Colubrid Corruption podcast. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms. You can check this out on all the major podcasting platforms as well. And don't forget, this show is also sponsored by Show Me Reptiles Show and the Show Me Marketplace. Thank you very much. And I appreciate them supporting the show. But yeah, guys, that is a wrap. So again, episode number 39 with PJ Kohn. Thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Have a fantastic night, and I will see you guys next week. We got our episode planned already. So hope you guys tune in and enjoy. Peace out.